Now, without further ado, I'd like to invite our first panel today. And the moderator for today's panel on anti-money laundering legislation and dispute resolution in the UAE will be Mohammed Alsuwaidi. Mohammed, you can turn your webcam on. Great, good to see you. And Mohammed is the founding partner and chairman of Alsuwaidi and Company. Prior to founding Alsuwaidi and Company, Mohammed was the head of legal at Emirates General Petroleum Corporation. So he was an in-house counsel before he started private practice. Now, over the past 2 decades, Mohammed has carved an enviable arbitration practice, supporting reputable names in the GCC and beyond. Mohammed, thank you very much for joining us today and setting up this very great presentation, hopefully. And over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you very much for actually giving us the opportunity to interact with the in-house counsels here in the UAE. Suwaidi and Company was founded in 1997, almost 24 years ago. And we've been practicing mostly litigation and corporate work. We have an office in Dubai and Abu Dhabi and Ajman that cover the whole Northern Emirates. I am here joined by my colleagues, and I will introduce them in the order they have joined the firm, which is first one is Suneer Kumar, who joined us in 2001, almost 20 years ago. Suneer is in our corporate department, handling a lot of setting up of companies and all transactional work and M&A in our Dubai office. Also, I introduced Reda Hegazy, who joined us in 2011. Reda, I think Suneer, you can stay on. Reda Hegazy has been with us since 2011, and he is into litigation and dispute resolutions, handles a lot of work that's related to courts and also arbitrations work. Also joining us also Vida Grace, who joined us in 2016. Actually, she joined us much earlier, but she had to go to the United States, and while she was there also, she did her master's degree and rejoined us in 2016. Also, Robert Sliwinski, who is our barrister that handles a lot of arbitrations, especially construction related, because he was a quantity surveyor before becoming a barrister and also a solicitor. So he handles all. He been in different hats. He wore different hats before, but now he is heading our arbitrations in Suwaidi and Company. As I was an in-house counsel before, so I know the difficulties that the in-house face. As an in-house, especially during that last 2 years of this pandemic, I think you come across a lot of issues. And as an in-house, your management will think, being a lawyer, you have to know everything in the law, whether it's anti-money laundering, whether it's dispute, whether it's different various employment laws, aviation laws, wherever. Your management will always think that you need to know everything. But unfortunately, it is not really the case, where you have to use other firms that are outside counsel to really help you out to do your work properly. And as I said, in the last 2 years were really challenging years for a lot of companies. And the management will always, put a lot of pressure on the legal department to handle all the dispute that they face because of the shortage in cash flow, and everyone is trying to chase his money. So that's why there's a lot of litigations. I think we have noticed, And as our outside counsel, our in-house counsel, we work closely with so many of you, and we always tell them that we are an extension of your office. So whenever, as an in-house counsel, need an issue, and you are our client, we will always pick up the phone and call your colleagues at any time to help you out with any issue that you might face. As I said, as an in-house counsel, you are required to minimize the risk of that your company could encounter. There is I don't know, there's that a cat or what, I don't know. Anyway, as an in-house counsel, as I said, you would be you would have to really focus on the issues that are happening around you, especially, as I said, with the risk that is involved here in Dubai. There's a lot of companies that some of them went bust. Some companies just ran away, and there are, you have a community of many different backgrounds, and so you would always have to be very careful with the contracts that you come across, and so you have to, as an in-house counsel, make sure you look and navigate through this risk that this environment you come across, in which to really help your company survive and navigate this. I would say this 2 years was uncharted territory, if you will. Nobody was expecting that pandemic to happen. We as a firm, we are very focused into dispute resolutions, and maybe I would say 70 to 80% of our work is into dispute resolutions, and we have around 7 lawyers just to attend courts. Fortunately, we do handle things now through the online, but we do sometimes go to court and attend, especially if we want to express, our views to the judge in a more, I would say, spontaneous way and something. So just to explain, maybe you could be more interactive with us and see the action of other judges as well. Now, before going into the panel, dispute resolution panel, I would like you, Raul, to really start our poll, if you don't mind. We have few questions, and I thought with those questions we need your really feedback, and if you could be kind enough to answer them, just to see, your feedback on it, please. Okay, thank you for your answers. I would like to, before going into the dispute resolution section, I would like to give you a small, brief overview of the legal system. I mean, maybe some of you that you are still new in the country, and so they're handling only commercial transaction of the company. I thought maybe we should give us a little bit of a brief about the legal system, not the court system, if you will. The courts in the UAE, there are federal courts and there are local courts. When we talk about local courts, we have Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and Ras Al Khaimah. They are all local courts. But in Abu Dhabi also, there is federal courts that handles issues are related to administrative work. And also, there is the high courts also, which handle also issues that related to crimes for national security. So other emirates like Sharjah, Ajman, Al Quwain, and Fujairah, they have they have federal courts. Federal courts, i.e., administered by the Ministry of Justice. The other emirates, I said, Ras Al Khaimah, Dubai, and Abu Dhabi, they have a local courts, which they have their own, administrations. within each emirates, and in each emirate there's also head of the courts. And all the courts are here in the UAE have three levels, i.e. First instance and appeal and the Court of Cassation. So Abu Dhabi almost has two Court of Cassation. One is for the local courts, and one which is the Supreme Court for the all federal cases that are handled by the other emirates. Dubai also has a Cassation Court, and so is Ras Al Khaimah. They all follow the procedure law, a federal procedure law, all of them. And you know, recently, I would say, we say recently 2018, that was I would say a new era in the legal procedures within the UAE. And you know, it's really, first of all, it took away the section of related to arbitration, and it was left to the new law, arbitration law, that handle anything related to arbitration. And it almost deleted many articles and gave the power to the cabinet of ministers to you know, issue resolutions to not to amend the law, but to cover areas that are not covered by the law. And this helped to really speed up the process of notification of the court, rejection of a lot of timing, but it kept, you know, the issue of you know, appeal period, which is 30 days and 60 days for the Court of Cassation. But in practice, it's really speed up the process where now you can use even the phone to ask the defendant to attend. You know, use email, use SMS to really notify the defendant, and also oblige the defendant to really follow the case once he's attended the hearing. He has his obligation to follow the case. There's no need for re-notification like what we used to have, because that used to really delay the time for the case. So now the cases, sometimes I feel it is just too fast, and especially also the applications of the law or the resolution of the cabinet of ministers. You know, the issue today, it will be applicable day after tomorrow. So that was, it created some hiccups for us as lawyers to keep with the law as quickly as possible. The problem, I mean, we have very short of time, so I cannot really go deep into this. But one of the good things that happened also this year, also, that the cabinet minister raised the threshold for the court of first instance. It used to be 500,000 and will be going to a 3 judges panel of 3 judges. Now it went all the way to 10 million, so it will be handled by one judge. This, I like this, because then judges will have more ownership on the judgment that they issued. You know, and this will, I think, help to improve the judges and their decision making. When usually there are 3 judges, everyone you know, will try to do something, and then, you know, they agree to it, and there is no real ownership of that judgment. And usually will be I feel that the judge, when he is responsible for his judge and the judgment will be in his name, he will be more diligent to issue the proper judgment. Unfortunately, for the pressure of time they are in, sometimes you see things are very I say shallow judgment a little bit. Sometimes you disagree with the finding of the judge because he did not go through all the finding, all the issues that we raised in our judgments. Sorry, in our pleading. I mean, I'm really, I said we need more time to explain this, but then my colleague will not be able to speak So I'll turn the floor actually to my colleague, Reda Hegazy and Robert Sliwinski for Reda to handle the onshore and Robert to handle the offshore. Now, Reda, I will ask, the issue of, as we said in the pool, we have an issue which is very important that been many judges. Also, due to the short of time that they have, they refer the issue to expert. Okay. So now I want to ask Reda actually, because it's an area that he's been working on for quite a number of years, and he's been dealing with a lot of experts. The issue of appointing expert in the UAE and in courts. And as you see in the court, will always sometimes will appoint a panel of 3 judges, 3 experts, or only one expert. I would like Reda to answer this question. What do you see the role of the expert in the UAE courts and in the dispute resolutions? I mean, in courts. Is it how big is the role of the expert?
Many thanks, Mr. Mohammed. Good afternoon, everyone. It is nice to see all of you and to be here today. I will be discussing on the experts and their role in the courts. The courts appoints an expert upon the party's demand or upon the sole discretion of the court. If the case involves technical matters like forgery, medical disability, maritime dispute, insurance dispute, construction dispute, etc. The expert is appointed on technical matters in which he specializes in order to assist the judge in investigating the receiving of testimony or witnesses, inspecting the sites, and assessing the documents, evidences put forth by the parties. Article 69 of Federal Evidence Law, number 10 of 1992, as amended, to provide that the court, when necessary, may appoint one or more of the experts from the court's list or of the registered experts. And also Article number 70 of the same law, on the other hand, allows for the opposite, for the parties to agree on the choice of one or more of the experts, and the court shall confirm their agreement. Sometimes you can come up with unreasonable findings of the expert. What are the experts' obligations towards the parties to achieve the impartial expert report? If may be allowed to provide this in brief, on the experts' appointment and its tasks, when we may be able to understand the experts' obligations towards the court and the parties. The mechanism of the appointment of the experts. What is the mechanism? Upon appointment of the experts by the court will issue a preliminary judgment. The preliminary judgment, it should be stating the experts' list of tasks to determine the scope of work, the fee to be paid by the concerned party, the deadline of the expert also to submit his report. The expert is expected to be restricted with these tasks, not go beyond these tasks, and also to for the expert to be by the court, he has to comply with the court with the time of the depositing the report. He must fulfill also his task truthfully and in good faith. He must not abuse his position by taking any bribe or any such things from the parties to favor such party in his report. To limit his findings on his opinions in the report and the evidences matters, and to leave the legal aspects of the case for the court not to involve in this issue. He must also diligently prepare his report and submit his report on the deadline fixed by the court, not after that. The mechanism of the expert's tasks: the expert will notify the opposing parties to set a meeting. The parties shall attend before the experts in person or through their legal representatives. In the said meeting, the expert will require the submission of documents, including the pleadings submitted earlier to the court in the case, and also to investigate from the parties on the technical issues. The meeting may be done via video conferencing or face-to-face, but as per our circumstances with the pandemic, normally it's going on by conference. The parties may argue their claims or defense in front of the expert, and the expert has the option to receive witness statement without oath, visiting governmental or non-governmental entities as may be required for his investigating of the case, visit the site subject to the case, visit the official offices of the parties in order to investigate the financial records or any other records as may be required. In case of settlement, maybe the parties will reach for settlement in front of the expert. The expert may do some like minutes of meeting, and he has to mention the settlement terms and the condition. And it will be the final report for him, and he has to submit it as it is to the court as a part agent.
I have a question.
Yes.
Now, after the experts submit his report, and sometimes the report, as we have come across, sometimes you feel that he even interfered in so many things. Even start discussing legal issues, that is beyond his scope of work. What do you do as an attorney, as a representative of your clients to oppose these kind of the finding of the expert?
Yeah, this is a very good question. Before the expert to submit his final report in front of the court, he has to make like a preliminary expert report. The preliminary expert report, he has to share it with the parties. He must to share it with the parties and to receive their comments or objections, if any. And he has to reply and put his view based on this comments and objections. After the final report, which will submit to the court, the parties also have a right to submit their objections also in front of the court. Sometimes the judge, the expert did not evaluate the documents well. He missed something to look at it, and it's very important for some issues in the case. Then the parties has a right to submit their comments and objection to the judge, and the judge has sole discretion to invite the expert in front of him to discuss these issues, or to refer the matter again along with the memorandum, which including the objections, in order to investigate it by the expert and to submit supplementary report to the court. Or the court also has a right to refer the matter to another expert or another committee of the expert. This is the issue.
I remember in one of the cases where we insisted to the judge, he said, we will bear the cause of a new panel. But the panel that issued the report we felt did not really take this issue seriously, and there's an issue that he did not handle. And we felt maybe there's some kind of bias being biased to the other to the opposing party, and the judge did accept our argument and appointed another panel. In one of the cases.
Yeah,
Yeah, I maybe that will, because of the interest of time, I would need to maybe ask Robert to give us the role of the expert in the offshore, i.e. the IFC, ADGM, or also the arbitrations. Could you tell us, Robert, about that, please?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much, Mohammed. The role of experts in the offshore courts, the DIFC, ADGM, which uses the common law principles, is rather different to the expert with the onshore courts, in so much as each party will instruct their own expert, which isn't to say that the court cannot actually instruct an expert themselves, but in most cases, the parties will instruct their own expert to provide a report, which they hope, of course, will support their case. Having said that, the expert must be independent. He's not expected by his own conduct to do anything other than be impartial, and his report is for the use of the court. It is not to support his client's claim per se. Clearly, if an expert is instructed, he will prepare his report in a way that's hopefully helpful to his client, but that isn't his main function. The information that is provided to him for his report will come from both the court documents and any documents that his client provides. He can ask for documentation, he can visit the site to prepare his report, but ultimately it's his report, not his client's report. And so there's a different emphasis on the way that an expert works. Once the report has been prepared and the other party's report has been prepared, it's for the judge to make a decision on those reports, to accept them, reject them, or take a bit from either report, depending how they believe the evidence has come out and which expert they prefer to a large degree. Mohammed.
I see. Saying that this dispute resolution issue here, we want to talk about the calling of bond. For the law, even before the pandemic, there's an issue, there's a problem related to cash flow for some of the companies, which affected also the construction industry. Have you seen any increase in number of calling for the performance bond fairly or unfairly by the employers?
Certainly within the last year, 18 months, there has been an increase in calling of performance bonds. Most performance bonds, and certainly in my specialist area of construction, they're on-demand bonds, and a bank is expected to pay if called upon without looking into the reasons. And through most of the world, of course, that's exactly what happens, unless you can show there's been something like fraud involved in the process. So with the cash flow issues that the industries have experienced over the last 18 months or so, especially with COVID causing a slowdown in works and non-payment by some employers, yes, contractors have certainly been calling on bonds against subcontractors, which of course exacerbates the subcontractors' cash flow because the bank will be looking for recovery from the subcontractor. So yes, Mohammed, there has been an increase.
Has many contractors claimed, for a justifiable delay because of the pandemic? Do you think they don't take a longer time to complete their projects? Do they use the force majeure?
Yes, clearly, indeed. Clearly, projects have been taking longer to complete, over and above the normal delays that one sees on projects. And yes, arguments of force majeure have been tried, but in reality, it's not really force majeure. The pandemic itself causes delay, certainly, causes disruption, certainly. It doesn't make the carrying out of the works impossible. And with force majeure, you're really looking at a contract that's becoming impossible to perform. So you need to be looking for other ways to make your claim, not relying on force majeure. And actually that makes sense anyway, because of course, with force majeure, you may get time, but you don't get cost. And of course, many contractors and subcontractors are suffering serious financial problems because of the delays and non-payment. So you'd be looking at any change in regulation, for example, that has affected the works due to the pandemic in part, but any change in regulation. That may be one way to try and pursue your claim.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, we can go on and on this subject, but I think I need to jump to the AML section for my colleagues too, and because we have very short time. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Robert. Here, we want to turn to a very important subject recently, which is AML, anti-money laundering. And it is a very important now to the UAE to have a strict compliance with international regulations related to AML. And in fact, we've been put on a gray list, and the UAE being put in the gray list in Europe related to this. And that's why now there's a committee, headed by Sheikh Abdullah Al-Hayyan, to really to make sure that this issue is being strictly followed. And we have to sign a lot of documents, being in fact, and the Ministry of Justice also came to our office to make sure that we also comply and follow the procedures. And without me explaining further, I would like to have my colleague, Vida Grace, to join us. Can you please explain to the audience the importance of AML?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mohammed, and good afternoon to all our attendees. As we all know, AML provides protection against misuse of the country's financial system for criminal activities. So activities that range from financial fraud, endangering people's financial security, to profiting from drug businesses, to funding terrorist activities. The recent updates to AML legislation in the UAE has meant that it is serious in upholding international standards and ensuring compliance to enhance the integrity of the global financial system. This is actually great for the UAE since it brings it in line with other global jurisdictions. This is very important for business and the UAE economy, leading to improved competitiveness, investment attraction, and enhanced reputation. Over the past years, since the first time that the AML was issued in 2002, up to the recent updates that we had in 2018, in 2019 with the implementing regulations, the AML CFT regime in the UAE has significantly improved by the UAE's heightened commitment on implementing rules, strengthening its policies, and crafting practical solutions for its effective implementation. For instance, just recently, the authorities have required all entities operating in the UAE, to the exceptions of those that are owned fully by the government and those operating in the financial free zones such as DIFC and ADGM, to disclose their ultimate beneficial owners. Further, supervisory authorities mobilize covered institutions to register in the GoAML platform and employ the filing of suspicious activity reports to identify fraud schemes, and to also subscribe to the automatic reporting system for the international and domestic sanctions list. All these government measures directly contribute to this regulatory authority's work to protect investors, consumers, and other stakeholders in ensuring that the financial market operates fairly.
Yeah, I like Suneer actually to also jump in, because how I want, hi Suneer, I want you to really explain this, how the AML regulation could impact organizations, if you don't mind. And what guidance you think we companies should follow?
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed, and good afternoon, everyone. So I just give a brief summary about how the AML impact us. So AML is a financial crime and it's a criminal offense punishable under UAE law. So the federal law number 20 of 2018, which is called new AML law, imposes a strict AML compliance obligations on financial and banking institutions and designated non-financial businesses and professions. It is called DNFBP, to strictly comply with the procedures and guidelines issued by the UAE regulators of AML. So why the new AML is important, or how it will impact on us? This is most important nowadays. So the old AML law, that is the federal law number 4 of 2002, which is repealed by the new AML law, only covered bank, financial institutions, exchange houses, insurance companies, agent, and insurance brokers. However, the new AML law widened its scope to cover DNFs, that is designated non-financial business and professions, in addition to the bank and financial institutions. So who are the DNFs and why they are included in the new AML law and what is their importance? So the DNFs are the real estate agent and brokers, dealers in precious metals and stones, and independent auditors, accountant, corporate service provider, legal consultant, lawyers, and notary public. The reason for the inclusion of the DNFP in the new AML law is due to increasing risk related to terrorist financing, trade-based money laundering, and misuse of legal person and lawyers, consultant, auditors, and dealers in precious stones and metals, especially in this region. So we can just examine how the trade-based money laundering take place. For example, if you take the example of the international trade, mostly by manipulating invoices, this is where they used to do. So what are the possible indicators based on this trade-based money laundering? So invoices value will be greater than the original value of the goods, discrepancies in domestic and foreign import-export data, suspicious cargo movement, and discrepancies in regarding the origin and description and value of the goods. Also, discrepancies in the tax declaration and export declaration. So this is the way in the trade, most of this one, the international trade, they use. Also, they use the perpetrator of the crime will use the professional services. So that is such as the lawyers, accountant, and brokers, to our former company formation agent, to seemingly legitimate business activity, to establish legitimate business activities. The possible indicator also here will be the accounts, and the company will, and the accounts and facility will be opened and operated by the company formation agent or the lawyer or a legal consultant on behalf of this perpetrator. So also serving as a nominee shareholder or a director, and also operate bank accounts. So also they will provide a false documentation and also place and also placing a moving illicit cash on the bank account and purchase the assets on behalf of this company and obtaining financial for the company. Other important aspect is,
Suneer, because we have a very short period of time.
Other important aspect is the offshore companies, how they use the offshore companies as a vehicle for that one for the facilitate as a money laundering purpose. So also means also use that purchase of the property. So that is another example of that one, how they use that one, the real estate brokers for the purchase of the properties. So these are the important. Also, there is a daily cash transaction limit for the dealers of precious stones and metal. That is AED 55,000 per single transaction or multiple transactions per day. Also, the lawyers should know that one lawyer should have not accept the cash more than 30,000 per transaction per a client. So therefore, lawyers and notaries and legal consultant and independent accountant should notify, evaluate, and understand the crime risk involved when preparing or conducting or executing financial transaction document, especially related to the sale and purchasement of the real estate units, establishing and operating and managing the companies, managing the fund owned by the customer, and managing the bank account, or selling and buying the commercial activities. So there are different regulatory authorities, because the central bank is directly supervised by the finance and banks and financial institutions. Ministry of Economy is supervised by the DNFs, except lawyers and the notary public. Lawyers and notary public are supervised by the Ministry of Justice.
I think you should not give all the information. We want them to come back to us, Suneer.
Yeah, this they should know. Then only they will come
Sorry,
back.
Because we are really running short of time.
So it is advisable. My advice that one, it is advisable for all these entities before engaging and with the prospective customers or conducting any business must undertake customer due diligence, including KYC, their UBO, identify activities, a source of fund, identify geographical and high risk jurisdiction. Also assess and monitor transaction, understand the AML and mitigate the risk. Otherwise, then face the consequences for not complying with the law. Thank you, Mr.
Before that, I have a question for you, Vida. Before that, but I need to run the poll. Sorry, Rahul, if you don't mind, if you can, put the second poll.
Right, Mohammed, will give another 15 seconds for everyone to answer the survey or the poll. There you go. You can see the results on your screen.
Okay, well, that's a good number. I mean, 89% they have procedures in place. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, a question to Vida. How to stay compliance? What guidance you can give?
Actually, since it seems like almost everyone already has their own AML compliance in their organization, I believe that I will just provide you the best practices or the fundamental aspects of an AML compliance. So firstly, as we all know, the AML regulation obliges the firms to conduct a risk-based approach. So thus, firms should adopt policies and controls pursuant to their risk-based assessment to guide them in the conduct of their due diligence process, apt for customers by implementing a customer identification program, or otherwise known as your KYC, know your client. Think policies through carefully. Try answering the questions: what are your KYC requirements? What reports are you generating? What is your record retention policy? What regulations are you complying with and how? What are your communication procedures? Second, adopt enhanced due diligence measures and mitigate the risk associated with high-risk customers and transactions. So the firms must take reasonable measures by requiring additional information and documentation to verify the source of the fund and the legitimacy of the transaction. You can also employ layers of approval, such as having the senior management approve first such transaction before embarking business relationship. Another aspect to it is the appointment of an individual to own the system. So you have to ensure that the policies are followed. So from a reputational and financial standpoint, consider a senior level individual from your company as the compliance officer. Lastly, there's a necessity for screening and monitoring on an ongoing basis. So there are various activities to track of: suspicious activities, change of status, watch list, new regulation, and other transaction monitoring needs. So from that point, you can employ ongoing monitoring of transactions methods. What are these methods? You have the threshold-based rules. This is when you examine the transaction based upon certain predetermined values, numerical volumes, or aggregate amounts. Second is the transaction-based rules. So you have to examine the type of transaction. Is it a large-scale cash payment transaction? You can also have a location-based examination, meaning you examine the transaction involving specific location. So sometimes it will alarm you, it is a red flag already, if the transaction is coming sometimes from an emerging market. So also there is customer-based examination, meaning you examine the transaction of a particular customer. So in the event that there are reasonable grounds to believe that the transaction is suspicious, so meaning it refers to transaction, even an attempted transaction, that the funds are related to financing of terrorism or earned through illicit means in whole or in part, regardless of the amount or the timing. So it can be a past incident already. A suspicious transaction report should be directly submitted to the GoAML platform, which is a platform utilized by the Financial Intelligence Unit. Also, covered institutions should register and subscribe online to the automatic reporting system for sanction list through the website Committee for Goods and Materials Subjected to Import and Export Control, which generates automatically the updated list of the targeted financial sanction from the UN Security Council.
Okay. I mean, we are really running out of short of time here. Suneer, you don't need to go away. You know, you just, hello, are you there, Suneer?
Yes, I'm here. Yeah.
How can Alsuwaidi and company help companies to stay compliant?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mohammed. So we, Alsuwaidi and company, we are publishing in the AML guidance, so which we can help this one, our clients or the audience who want, they can send us their contact details. We can share to them this one. We can share the copy of the same, so we can assist. Depend on the nature of the business and their existing AML framework. We assess the extent of the support that may be required to ensure AML compliance under the UAE AML law. So we will provide a corporate AML diagnostic, AML policy and procedures, AML standard setting, due diligence procedure, and AML compliance and AML, even AML training. So this can help if the means those who want to have that one, our assistance, we can provide, and we can also share the copy of our AML guidelines in order to comply with the procedure and to avoid and to mitigate the risk, as well as to comply with the UAE authorities, regulators of the AML.
Thank you, Suneer. I mean, I trust that very well because, you know, when we were visited by the Ministry of Justice, you know, they were checking our AML procedure and they like it. And they said, we could ask you to check on others, not us, you know, checking on you. Thank you very much, Vida and Suneer, for your time and for this informative you know, for this information that you gave us. And I think maybe we should leave the floor for the question and answer by any of the in-house counsel if they want to. You can stay on, Suneer, please. I mean, you can stay on. Also, Reda and Robert, if you're going to join us also, please. So maybe people might have a question.
Right. Mohammed, we've received a question here in the chat function, and I'll request all the attendees, if they have any questions, please send it in the Q&A box for the speakers from Alsuwaidi and company. The question is actually directed at Reda. It says, as per your experience, Reda, what is the percentage of the expert view informing the court's doctrine in decision making?
Yes, regarding this, the answer to this question, from my experience, the majority of the cases this type referred to the expert, and the judge is normally waiting for the technical report of the expert in order to build his judgment reasons.
Yeah, I think he's also very, very high percentage, really high percentage.
Yeah,
high percentage.
Yes, yes,
very high percentage. That's why.
Yeah, because the judge, he cannot go to interfere in this matter because it's a very critical technical issue. That is why he is waiting the expert report in order to issue his judgment.
And that's why it is important to the client, for the client to really prepare all the proper documents for every single document that could come across. Because sometimes if you cannot convince them, try to confuse them, by the way. This is something that we use sometimes, not us, I mean, to really confuse, but we felt that things are not very well covered, so we had to put a lot of information for the expert. And some other law firms are doing that, making it really confusing for the expert to come across, to come up with a conclusion. And that's why you have to be diligent in what you submit and try not to leave the other party to mislead the expert. Is there any other question here? I don't see any other question, really. I mean, did we really cover everything for you guys, or you are not really
Right.
interested?
We actually have a couple of questions, actually. So one question is, have AML inspections started far and wide for DNFPBs, or is it still being slowly introduced? Have you seen fines being implemented for lack of AML compliance?
Thank you, Rahul. This already implemented, and the ministry also issued the many regulations and notifications in each month. So even you can see recently, this one, the UAE issued a resolution number 83 of 2021 by publishing local terrorist list, designating 38 individuals, including UAE nationals, and 15 entities on its approved list of persons and organizing and supporting terrorism. And these entities include trading companies, shipping, logistic, cargo and clearing, and money exchange, etc. So it is already implemented, and also means imposing the fine for not complying with these regulations.
Very true. Very true. In fact, the Ministry of Justice issues a list of all the law firms that were not registered, and not really having a complying officer within their named the complying officer within their firm, and was really a big issue for all the law firms that were not registered.
Also in June 2021, Ministry announced the detection of 100 violations by DNFPs and the issuance related amounting to total value of 85 million fine imposed.
Right. We have one more question. How far back should KYC measures be remediated to comply with the new AML laws?
Say that again.
Right. How far back should KYC measures be remediated to comply with the new AML laws?
How many years back, you mean?
Yes, I believe so. How far back?
Means when, suppose if you are entering a new client, if you are taking in a new client, so it should be all, you have to follow the KYC. So also, if you did not submit the KYC, so if the client is an existing client, so everyone has to also to prepare and submit the KYC. So there is an KYC and the UBO and then ESR submission. All the entities and should follow and means regularly update the KYC of their clients.
I think we are talking about existing clients that are working. I mean, you cannot just go after 20 years and just check who has been working on this and what is a KYC for that client.
Even if the existing client, also has to update the client data.
I'm saying it's just the existing client that you want to work with. If someone you have worked with 20 years back, only that 20 years back, I don't think you are obliged to submit any information about that.
You have to keep the record for 5 years. That is the record of the 5 years record is must.
But what you do for 5 years, I mean, you have done a transaction 5 years ago, okay? Or just say before the introduction of the law, would you just go and require that client to submit information to you, although you are no longer working with that client? Let's put the question a different way.
No, the 5 years starting from when they end, and this means end your relationship with that client from that date when it is in 5 years, you have to keep the record.
Okay.
Great, thank you so much. If there are any other questions for any of our speakers today, you can get in touch with them directly. I've actually shared the email IDs and phone numbers of all the speakers in the chat. I would request everyone to copy paste it somewhere, because you might think of a question later on and you really want to have the details, the contact information of our presenters today. Right, so we've got one question. I'll just read it out, and we don't have too much time. So if you want to take it afterwards or reply to this gentleman afterwards, you can do that. It's a marine sales, spare sales service company. Question is, for cash sales, do we need to obtain due diligence documents from every customer? Can you answer that very quickly?
If it is the customer, of course, you have to have the cash sales. There is a cash sales limit. So there is a cash sale limit. So you have to obtain this one KYC of that one, the customer.
Okay, all right, brilliant. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. That was quite insightful presentation. Thank you, Mohammed, Suneer, Vida, Robert, and Reda. As I mentioned previously, if you have any questions for them, please send them an email. And Mohammed also mentioned that they have, or Suneer rather mentioned that they have a AML guidance book with all the information. So if you need to get a copy of this guidance book on AML, please email any of the speakers, or email Suneer, since he mentioned it, and his email suneer@alsuwaidi.ae. It's in the chat function. All right, thank you so much again. And I'd ask you now to close your webcam and make sure that you're on mute as we go on to our next panel discussion session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, now we are going to our next panel discussion. And this panel discussion is about creating a diverse, equal, and inclusive organization. So it's about DE&I and the role of an in-house legal department. Plus, we'll also talk about mental well-being beyond the pandemic. We have about 60 minutes to discuss this, which is nearly not enough. We understand that this is a big topic. We have a lot of experts on this panel today. The idea is to start this conversation or to be part of this conversation and bring in-house counsel into this conversation, and follow up with perhaps more of these events for in-house counsel in the UAE. Right, so what I'd like to do is just share my screen and introduce our panelists for today. I see Andrew has turned his webcam on. Hi, Andrew, looking great there. Right, just give us 1 second. Right. So our panelists today, as you saw, Andrew Cooke, he's the General Counsel of Fnatic. We also have Deepa Tharmaraj, Senior Legal Director at Dell Technologies. Apologies for the typo there. Faizal Latheef, who's the Regional Legal Counsel, Middle East and Africa of AbbVie. Mohammed Alsuwaidi, Managing Partner, Alsuwaidi and Company. I feel like I've seen him somewhere. And we have Sadiq Jafar, Managing Partner, Hadif and Partners. Apologies for the typo there also. And Yosr Hamza, Director, Legal Affairs, Middle East for Gartner. Can we have all of the panelists' videos on? Hello, good to see you all.
Good to see you all.
Wonderful, great, thank you. Now, straight away, I'd like to get into the mental well-being part of this discussion. And Andrew, I'd like to ask you a question. We have happy lawyers, we have unhappy lawyers. Now, can you give us your thoughts about what unhappy lawyers do wrong and what happy lawyers do right?
All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. Let's not engage from the start in victim blaming, Rahul. I don't think that necessarily the lawyers are unhappy because of the things that they do or are not doing. One of the things that we're here to do today, I think, is to bring some light and understanding into those lawyers who might be feeling a little bit behind the curve. But let me just take a step back from that at the moment and say that lawyers' happiness is one of the things that motivates me most, as in driving it, and that's really for three reasons. First of all, because there's a very strong correlation between engagement, which we're going to use here as a proxy for happiness and well-being, and success in law. The absolute leading study in this area is Gallup's Q12 analysis. They do a meta-analysis every couple of years, and the most recent meta-analysis, 2020, has 2.7 million survey participants in it off more than 100 countries. And what that survey says is there's a very, very strong link between the extent to which somebody is engaged at work, which again, we're using here as a proxy for happiness, and things that are good for business outcomes, by which I mean avoiding defects in production processes, avoiding sick days, avoiding churn in your team, all those kind of things. All those things for me map directly onto the in-house process. So we want lawyers to be happy, that's a good thing. Second thing is, I find that lawyers have lots of skills that they very falsely think that everybody has, where in fact that's not the case, right? So lawyers come up through high performance environments. Usually they're very high performing people themselves. They are usually very conscientious, very hardworking, very intelligent. Those three things alone are very high predictors of success in business more generally. But lawyers look at it across the wrong spectrum. They think that everybody in the world has those kind of things, whereas in fact it's just their immediate peer group in some instances. So that also drives a misunderstanding of where lawyers can add value. And then finally, the third point is, I have during the course of my life, I'm sad to say, met a lot of unhappy lawyers. So notwithstanding the fact that happiness is very important to business success, notwithstanding the fact that lawyers, very generally speaking, have a set of skills which is really critical to business success, can drive value for the businesses they work for, they still seem to find themselves in this place. So what are we going to do about that is the question, I think, today, or one of the questions today. And for me, the answer is their control over workflow, and also recognizing, I think for in-house lawyers as well, that some of the things that you learned about the way in which business is done may be driven by how law firms look at the world rather than how businesses more generally look at the world. Law firms are probably not going to train you in management skill, so taking and getting the most out of the people that work for you. They're probably also not going to train you in process, which is absolutely critical to success in-house. And they may also not necessarily be driving engagement, and that may be because their focus is on deliverables rather than overall business goals. And for me, the sort of key takeaway here is, if you are an in-house counsel and you need to drive that, meaning get control of your workflow and so on, focusing on business goals rather than individual deliverables is a really great place to start. You are regrettably muted, Rahul.
Sorry, I should know this better. So when we were doing some of our sort of fleshing out some of the ideas to talk about it, one of the topics that came up is isolation. So whether you're a lawyer who's proactive and knows the scope of work in the coming few weeks or months, or whether you are a more reactive lawyer, sometimes lawyers do work in silos, and it's obviously not good for mental well-being. So what can lawyers do to feel connected? Now, this question is especially, I wanted to ask Deepa. So what can lawyers do to feel connected?
So, just on the back of what Andrew was saying, the key word, Andrew, you used was around engagement. So the key word that I'm going to use quite a bit in today's session is about, the fact that as a lawyer, especially being in-house, working in a small team, we can sometimes feel that we are different from the others, in the sense that we're different from the sales teams, we're different from the finance groups, from the HR team. The word is different. And I actually want to start with a quote. It's from Charles Evans Hughes. He was a Chief Justice in early 19th century. Or 20th century. And he said, when we lose the right to be different, we lose the privilege to be free. And I think that's a very strong quote to start with, because as long as I feel I am different, and that is a perception, it's a mind and heart thing. And so, we go into a room, and as long as I feel that I'm different, I will draw negative attention to myself. And that difference can come from our culture, it can come from neurodiversity, it can come from gender, it can come from being able-bodied or someone with, disability, whatever that difference is that we perceive that we have in ourselves. So if you go into a room full of people with, who lack self-awareness and who lack or who may have unconscious biasness that have been left unchecked. Research shows that as individuals who think that we've got differences in ourselves, that we are consciously preparing our mind and heart every day. And, again, on the back of what Andrew was saying with Gallup report, there is another interesting report that you should read from Catalyst around emotional tax, because we can go into these meeting rooms thinking that people are going to be judging us, and one of the keywords I'm going to use here today is, that we've got to ensure that as an individual, number one, to keep your unconscious biasness checked in every time. Number two, to pause and suspend your judgment. So when you see someone who you think is different from you, is to really pause and suspend your judgment and to reframe your mind before you make dangerous assumptions about someone else. Because as humans, the most natural thing for us to do is to actually gravitate towards negative judgments about someone who looks different from us. And I mean, I'm going to give an example before, I finish what I have to say, is, for example, if as an individual, I think, or I believe that I speak English as my first language, and I've got someone else in the meeting room where, English is not their mother tongue. And let's say they speak, English is perhaps second, third, or fourth language. And, there is a tendency sometimes for us to paraphrase what someone else has said because of their strong accent or twang. I mean, even I myself, I've got an accent, I've got a twang because of where I was brought up. And so, it's a way of, in a meeting, we've got to be conscious not to paraphrase what someone else is saying, just because you think that the others may not understand because they spoke with an accent or twang. So that is about me really keeping my unconscious bias checked in and not really making that first person feeling excluded because they've got an accent or a twang, And so the way in which we can really bring together, really bring the best outcome out of every difference in the meeting room is to recognize that every difference is unique and that there's a lot of value in that, uniqueness. So the best way to do it, and in fact, in the follow-up question later on, Rahul, I will talk about, the programs that we can run in order to educate our employees. So leaders have got a very important role in order to ensure that that employees learn about unconscious biasness, they learn about self-awareness, they learn about self-management, they learn about conflict management. All that is important as an employee, but leaders have that role. So I want to just finish off with another quote.
Right.
And you may have heard this quote before, that I'm not different like you, but I am different like you.
Well said. Well, yeah, I mean, what we want to do from this session is give actionable insights. I think, Deepa, you've mentioned something that's very, very important: unconscious bias at the workplace. UAE has a lot of different, it's a very diverse city. So you're working with very diverse people in your office. And I think there's nothing more troubling in terms of mental wellness if you go as a different nationality or as a diverse person to an office and be subject to unconscious biases. I think and especially for lawyers, like Andrew said, they're very high performing, busy lawyers, busy professionals. It's very important that they feel welcome, and uniqueness should be celebrated. Now, if any of the attendees today have any questions for our panelists, please send them in the Q&A box. We'll try to get to them if we have time. I have a question for Sadiq. Sadiq, as a managing partner of a law firm, what lessons have you drawn from the 20 months of the pandemic as regards to A, the well-being of the people at the firm at Latheef and Partners, and B, the well-being of your clients who are part of the in-house community?
Yes, thank you, Rahul. I mean, clearly it's been a pretty interesting 20 months of the pandemic, and we're still counting. I think in the UAE, we're very fortunate, and I think most of the people on this call are based at this eCongress are based in the UAE. So, I mean, your question is, what have we learned in the last 20 months about the well-being of our own people and the well-being of our clients? And I think I won't go into sort of the obvious that we've learned about flexibility and we've learned about technology, and our clients and ourselves are much more adept with flexibility and technology. Because I think, so many businesses talk about that, and I think this is an experience that we're still learning from, because we have to work out how future operations will be conducted. And I think that what I have learned, and the second part of your question is about the well-being of clients in the in-house community. And picking up on the last two speakers, I mean, Andy talked about, and I made a note because I thought it was very interesting, about engagement. And I think that what we have learned, and it's something I suppose, knew before, is that we must remain engaged with our clients, engaged with the in-house community. And I think it was also mentioned by Deepa that, sometimes the in-house departments, especially in the UAE, they vary in size. There's some very large in-house teams, there are small in-house teams. And I think the point was made that even within a large company, the in-house legal department could be small and therefore different because it's small, which I think is a really good point. I think that what we want to learn and continue to learn is to engage with the in-house community to understand how we can help their well-being, and also how the in-house community can help our well-being. I mean, I know that Andy has talked about, in previous conferences, about trying to ensure that the lawyers, the external lawyers, do not work beyond 6 p.m. And that's a policy of his company to try and avoid that. And I'm sure that a lot of law firms are still proud of, working late, working weekends. But I think increasingly, the world is engaged in understanding mental health and well-being. And part of that is really working practices. It's mutual respect between the client, the in-house legal department and the law firm, and vice versa. So really it comes down to understanding and communication. And I think we've always known that communication is key to business, to relationships. And of course, relationships are key to our business. So that virtuous circle of us engaging with each other, with our colleagues and with our clients and with the in-house community, I think that what I'm learning is that is the key to our success. I mean, I think Andy, again, I'm picking up from what he said, that we need to have good business outcomes, and we achieve that through engagement. I think we achieve well-being, as he said, through engagement, through being proactive, being active lawyers, not reactive lawyers. So I would like to engage with our clients, whether they're in-house lawyers or other parts of the company. But of course, this conference is all about the in-house community. So we're looking at ways of doing that. And secondly, we fully understand, I think some great points were made. Lawyers have a lot of skills, Andy said. And he said that The difficulty is unlocking those skills and realizing that we do have a lot of talent. In-house lawyers, of course, have a lot of talent. So what we're trying to do in our organization to unlock value and unlock talent is to look at development. You look at development of our people, of course, our technology, but most importantly, our people. So we want to be constantly training and retraining all of us, from junior to senior. We need to be learning new skills. We need to be reminded. We need to engage with our clients. So we have hired a very important post in our firm who, the title is all about business operations. He's a lawyer and an HR specialist at the same time. So he's looking at career development for every single lawyer, whether junior all the way through to myself, is looking at improving our skills, improving our ability to perform. And part of that is engagement. And our business development team is very active, of course, in that, and they work together.
Right.
So I think what I would like to do, and we can take this on a different call with individuals who are interested, is to see how we can help legal departments. And of course, they may be able to help us. I don't want to be one of those law firms that thinks that, we have a bit more scale in the UAE and we can teach others. I want to emphasize that we're learning all the time ourselves and we can learn from others.
I think you're right. It is a two-way street. And it's very important to listen to the clients. I think, Sadiq, you mentioned engagement, and it goes both ways. So, and this is one of the engagements, Sadiq. You are speaking to in-house counsel over here. So, it's very important to listen to your clients and vice versa. In-house counsel attendees today, if you have any points that you would like to make to Sadiq or to Mohammed as private practice lawyers, how they can engage with in-house counsel in a way that is nurturing of mental well-being for both them and you, please get in touch with them. Right. I'd just like to move to Yosr. Hi, Yosr. When we were discussing this, you mentioned that you have been working outside of your headquarters, and quite a lot of it is remote work, which has its own complications and challenges. It'll be really beneficial for all of us over here to hear from you about what you've learned working remotely and how you create work-life balance for yourself and for the people you manage or you work with.
Sure. I take Deepa's point here is that, us as legal, we normally feel that, we're different, right? And I think I'll take that point, prior to the pandemic, I was someone who was based outside the Middle East. I report into the headquarters in the US, and I almost felt isolated, like every initiative they want to pilot, they want to run, it takes out of the headquarters in the US. Now, when everything turned remote and all of us are now working either from home or at least from outside the offices, it was easier to engage and connect and rethink about how can everyone re-engage within the team. It was easy to say that we're humans after all behind the screens, right? So I think we can say that good can come out of the current events. Of course, my own list of things are definitely going to be different, and there's nothing wrong and right here, but I think I'm someone who thrived during the pandemic, and I had a lot of opportunities that I wouldn't have had if I was still working from the office, because one, I'm a sole legal person within my team. I cover a huge team within the sales organization. There's a huge team that is based outside the Middle East who I always felt isolated, never connected to. And there's a lot of things they do, but I felt like, oh my God, I'm still outside, their office, right? So I'll give an example of what we've done. I think one of the things Gartner did, and I think I'm grateful for that, is that social distancing and this remote working environment made every and each one of us feel that they're empowered, they're in control of our work-life balance. So I no longer can someone tell me you have to work from 9 to 6 or whatever, right? As long as you provide your results, no one cares when you work. there's an area of everyone now being more authentic, being more vulnerable, right, on their cameras. So there's no, I no longer feel the judgment if I have my kid on my camera, his like, I'll say crying or at least playing around. That kind of judgment, if I'm working remotely and your kids are around, that kind of being authentic, being vulnerable is there. It's being encouraged. It's something that we as legal never talked about, but it's being, being encouraged even more, not just in Gartner, but even outside. I would say, once being sign of weakness, it's now the kind of the center of the stage, whether it's being remote working or even flex hours. This is something I've always encouraged my team, like my direct reports, to do. I never told them like, you have to come to office at 9. If you don't, like, you're fired. It's not the case. I always felt like I'm encouraging them to do that, but it was always seen as something so different. And like, how come are you doing that? And, everyone in the office felt like you're doing something strange, but now it's being, the center of the stage within the office. Now, when I'm talking about the HQ and me being in the Middle East, I'd say that, because we're all remote, we had a lot of virtual initiatives and virtual events. Me being as a working parent and so engaged with my kid, I felt isolated as someone in the Middle East. I felt isolated as a working parent. I felt isolated because I'm a female within such a very male-dominated community. And I felt like, there's a lot of change that I can do, but I didn't have the chance to do that because I'm based in a different region, right? So at the moment, I got the chance to be part of our Mosaic board within Gartner. So Mosaic, it's a group that allows us, to engage as employees globally, from different backgrounds, underrepresented groups, to, help encourage the discussion within the company and, provide a safe space to initiatives, whether it's just fireside chats or even discussions. I'm leading the chapter of Women at Gartner within the Middle East. And again, talking about more women empowerment, not just about the chats, but how can we change our policies within the Middle East to bring even best practices from the global HQ to Gartner, whether it's about maternity leaves, paternity leaves, providing more equality, we can put it in that perspective. I had the chance to even initiate and be part of a pilot program for mentorship within Gartner. And it was piloted as a very small program as part of Women at Gartner. I wouldn't have the chance to do that, if it was piloted only in the US back then, because, that's the HQ now, because I had the chance to do that. And it was a huge success to the extent that we're now running that as a company-wide program, where everyone can have the chance to do that on a quarterly basis, right? So anyone can apply for that globally.
Right.
I give one more thing, that there's the Legal and Compliance DE&I Council. So, we had always talked about, like, everyone keeps talking, like, we need to do more DE&I initiatives, whether it's in terms of engagement, hiring, advancing our talent within the global team, but there was no action, right? So it really depended on how well you're connected with HQ. Because we're in the pandemic, I had the chance to connect with a lot of peers, including my superiors outside. Me and my peer actually established something called the Legal DE&I Council, which is basically focused mainly on our legal business unit, ensuring that we meet both diversity and well-being initiatives within our team, or as well working with our suppliers and external counsel, and ensuring that there is, I would say, there's no one blanket initiative that works for everyone within our team, right? I'm someone who's a working parent, someone else is, single, or he has kids who are at school, or his kid is just being newly born. Right. The kind of well-being that works for someone doesn't necessarily work for someone else. And I think that the key word here is that empowering the people, empowering your employees, making sure that whatever works for them, rather than, saying that I have a DE&I initiative or a well-being initiative, is ask your people, ask your employees what works for them. So we're not really running, a company, initiative. Yes, of course there is, but right. On the more individual, smaller basis, every one of us now is empowered more to ask their people what works for you, to ensure you're able to do your job and also maintain that kind of, mental health and well-being.
Right, absolutely. And I think going back to what Sadiq said, and also Andrew said, Deepa as well, it's engagement. It's talking to your colleagues or your seniors as well, and finding out what is wellness, well, what sort of initiative is what is for you, what is mental well-being for you. And this is one of the actionable insights that in-house counsel or attendees can take right now from what Yosr said, is that if you feel isolated, whether you're working in the headquarters or outside of it, find out the circle. So find out what makes you happy. See if there is something internally within your organization that nurtures that. Or like Yosr did, take the initiative and try to start it yourself. Right. Very quickly, I know I'm very cognizant of the time issues over here. So quickly, would like to move on to Faizal, because it's very interesting. Faizal comes in from a healthcare industry. So Faizal, could you share some insights with the audience today about mental well-being initiatives, either from a healthcare organization which you work in, AbbVie, or and how these initiatives, being part of them, has affected your mental well-being as well as your colleagues? Can you give us some insights?
Thank you, Rahul. First of all, it's great to see that the concept of mental well-being is gaining some traction among lawyers finally. And I must also say that it's a great pleasure to listen to all my fellow panelists sharing these fascinating ideas on mental well-being. So if I say about AbbVie, I've been associating with this pharmaceutical company in one way or other since its formation in 2013. And this is an organization which always gave great importance to mental well-being of all its stakeholders, not just its employees, but also third-party stakeholders like external counsel and more importantly, our patients. So we have a variety of initiatives and programs under this head. If I start on a smaller scale, we have, like many other organizations, we have the flexibility to choose the place of work or the hours of work. Each function or team is allowed to choose whatever works better for them, but within a certain framework. In the MEA region, we are also currently discussing the possibility of implementing sort of a blackout day. It could be in one of the weekends and probably outside of the entire work hours as well, where employees are encouraged, probably restricted as well, to send out emails or fixed meetings or calls within AbbVie and externally. And I can tell you that this is something that I have implemented successfully within the legal function, particularly with our external counsel, and is well received across all the stakeholders. So to touch upon another initiative is an informal online platform called AbbVie Vitality. This is a platform which helps us to connect with our colleagues across the world in a very informal setting. So the objective is to exchange ideas, share thoughts and stories, and influence and inspire each other to lead a better life. There are different challenges that you can be part of, whether as an individual or as a team. And the platform also offers informational resources and training sessions on mental wellness.
That's very useful. Can everyone use this platform, or is it just for the
No, this is for AbbVie employees.
Okay.
But something I would also like to mention about, which anybody can use of is something which I'm really proud of is our initiatives focused on the well-being of our patients. So many other pharmaceutical companies have patient support programs to support patients on a variety of matters, which could include educating them on diseases and drugs, importance of adherence to treatment plans, etc., etc. We have a designated patient support program as well, which we call AbbVie Care. But how it differentiates is that we have a separate vertical where we focus only on the mental well-being of patients. So we have tied up with a third-party service provider to provide mental wellness sessions to patients. And many of these patients have chronic diseases, and it is extremely difficult for them to lead a normal life. This can be due to various reasons like social stigma, anxiety, or stress, or many other reasons. So these sessions could be one-on-one sessions or group sessions these sessions guide them on how to manage these situations in a better way and lead a life that is as close to normal.
Sure. Great. Thank you for that. And I think what you mentioned about block dates, is that what it is called? Block dates?
No, it's a name that I was just mentioning, a blackout date.
Blackout dates. Okay. I think that's a really good concept. I've heard this before in other companies. I think in Hong Kong, I've heard of it. One of my friends, he's an in-house counsel and they have it. It's great. If there was one day where I was not required to email anyone, and also it was okay, for nobody to receive an email from me, that'll be great. That's a great holiday right there. That's something people can implement right away. I just like to move to Mohammed. Mohammed, when we were discussing this, you mentioned, well, actually 2 questions for you. One is we were discussing about being physically active, which translates into mental well-being. So can you tell us a little bit about your initiatives in terms of physical fitness at your firm that would translate to mental well-being? And also, would you be looking at implementing these blockout dates where no email goes out and no email comes in? What are your thoughts about that?
Thank you, Rahul. Okay. There are 2 things that are very common between lawyers: stress and being sedentary. Very, very common. A lot of lawyers either get divorced, commit suicide, jump out of a bridge, start doing something like that in order to really, deal with the level of the stress that they have. As I told you, I had one time I had back pain because of being sedentary, too much sedentary. So I decided that I should really help my colleague. It's really, I try to look at the well-being of those colleagues, myself and my colleague. I always put myself in the shoes of my colleagues. And as a firm, you are as good as your people, and the people has to be happy, has to be healthy. And you as a managing partner, it is your obligation to look at the well-being, not the physical only, also the mental. What I did is I managed to list every single employee in the gym, whether it's in the Dubai office, whether in the building that we are in, or even outside, and also in other Emirates, Abu Dhabi and Ajman. It was fine, but I noticed that people are not really using that. We paid for the gym and nobody is using it. And I see the bellies are still the same. So I thought the best way is to hire someone. I had my personal trainer before. I hired him, and he studied law, by the way, in Egypt. And I get him in and ask him to really follow everyone who is in the gym with us here or outside. They give them a food program, they give them training program, and make sure they come and exercise. In fact, we created even a group in a WhatsApp group for only the well-being of the individuals. So we put all the photos of everyone exercising, and that translated on a less stress lawyers. Sometimes you cannot control the volume of work you have, but then you can control the reaction to it. How stressed are you because of that? And in order to keep them happy, I thought they need to exercise. And that's what happened. They are exercising, their bellies went down, and I feel, everyone was telling me they feel happier, which is the most important thing, happier, and they will continue to exercise. Even when they are not at work, they continue to exercise.
Great. And I think that's very important to keep physically in shape. It does translate into mental well-being. And also, if you have Mohammed Alsuwaidi telling you that you need to come and exercise, you will come and exercise in your office. But the key is that everybody should try to exercise, get some exercise. It's not just about working. And as Mohammed mentioned, a lot of the work can be sedentary. We'll be sitting all throughout the day looking at papers. I think it's very, very important. Right.
But here, Raul, I need to ask something. Because of this sitting environment, we ask a company to change all our desks, or some of the big desks, we just change the legs of it, where you can, with the press of a button, this will jump up, and you can work while standing, and sometimes exercising, doing some, work up, something like this, in order to stay physically fit. So I have an obligation to my colleague. They join Alsuwaidi and they leave Alsuwaidi and they are still fit and well. This is very important to me. This is an obligation that I took on my head. And from that angle also, we reduce stress. We ask people, to go into meditation session that we have. My secretary is a good meditator, so she come and give them this kind of session where they try to relax, try to loosen up a little bit, and we, as in the company, we also look at the psychological issue that some of my colleagues could face. Our HR will go and talk to them, and we'll try to come and step in to help them out to stay I would say well, and try to combat the problem that they have.
It's a good thing. It's good to know that you also have a system in place where if somebody needs a little bit more guidance on how to stay well, either physically fit or mentally fit, there is something in place at Alsuwaidi and Company. But that's great.
I want to add something. Sorry, Raul. I want to add something also.
Very quickly. We have very less time.
Because we are so many, a lot of people coming from different nationalities, and sometimes they are single here, and they are away from their families. And we always designate someone to be in point of contact in case of just something emergency that's happened to them. So immediately the firm will step in to help them out, whether there's a problem or something, or a car accident, whatever. There's someone they could contact from the firm to make sure. And also, many times I really ask people to leave the office because they were staying too long in the office. I don't want them to do that.
Great. Thank you very much. Now, quickly, I like to go over, and all these answers, we could take all these answers and create another webinar or another discussion just around those answers. So we're trying to get as many points in so that we can then flesh it out afterwards in subsequent meetings. Andrew, I'd just like to focus on the relationship between in-house counsel and private practice lawyers. I know we touched upon it earlier. As an in-house counsel, what do you expect from your external counsel in terms of creating a work environment which nurtures mental well-being?
Well, I think Sadiq touched on this earlier on in terms of it being a two-way relationship. I think expectations of external counsel are increasing in part because there's so many more people in-house now with an understanding of how processes work and what they expect from their counsel. So, that's driving that expectation up. Also, I think law firms are starting to understand better that they're actually selling Rolls Royces, not Camrys. And so there's a level of personalization to the service and to the customer service, which needs to reflect that. Like, your bills as external counsel are always going to be amongst the highest bills that we face as a business. And I think, again, increasingly, there's now an understanding of the services required to go with that. But I'd encourage all in-house counsel to remove hierarchy from their relationship with external counsel and see that effectively your relationship is as a joint venture, and the joint venture asset is the goals of the customer, right? So what it is that we as a business are trying to achieve, we share those goals with you. We use that to generate meaning in our relationship with you. And I would say that drives sort of two effects, really. The first one is, I expect you to understand the goals that we're driving towards as business and some of the associated behaviors that are going to support achievement of those goals. Secondly, I think, and I'll expand on that point in a second. And secondly, I think there's a trend that we both need to be aware of, by which I mean in-house and external counsel, and that is towards the way in which services are being delivered now. In a B2C context. So we remodeled our workflow recently to reflect the fact that our customers now expect services to be delivered instantly, by which I mean on demand, whenever they want them, not just in a quick time, not just by emailing me and then getting the answer, I mean complete separation of legal from the process. You can't achieve that kind of service delivery through people. You have to deliver it through process. And so necessarily speaking, when we talk about goal achievement, we're going to be talking about it in process terms. And so we need our law firms to understand that piece. I think the law firms are still often, and I haven't worked with the firms that are on this call extensively, so I can't comment on their response to this. I think law firms are still thinking along the lines of throwing bodies at problems, and particularly throwing bodies at deliverables rather than working with clients towards goals. Personally speaking, my end of the joint venture in relation to these goals is not just to share that information with you, but also to work with you proactively as a firm. And I think this is one area where, again, I would encourage in-house counsel to consider the ways in which they can tailor their relationship with law firms. So we will offer proactively involvement of me and my teammates in your training, your processes, your discussions around these kind of things. I'm here to invest in the relationship as much as I would expect you to invest in the relationship with us as the client. This is not a transactional thing, it's a joint venture. And secondly, I think what I love hearing from Mohammed is his willingness to go that extra mile in terms of setting a standard for himself, by which I mean he will try and model these behaviors and encourage and recognize that younger people in the firm are going to look to him to how they should act. And again, across the piece, general counsel are being encouraged to model these positive behaviors, because if we as regulated professionals are not going to do it, how can we expect other people in the business to do the same thing? One way in which this can be captured, and you touched on it, Sadek, earlier on, is around engagement goals with counsel. So we have guidance for external counsel. I started doing this when I was at Flash in the UAE, and I do it now at Fnatic. And that is effectively not just in terms of how bills are coming in and those kind of structural prosaic points, but also increasingly behavioral guidelines. So the one that Sadek mentioned was we are encouraging all of our external counsel now to maximize the well-being and the attention that they pay to stress in their workforces. One of the things that we do in that regard is to say that we won't pay for time incurred after 6 p.m. And the reason for that is because I want the best time. This is business driven. This is, it goes to my values, but it's also good business, because you guys don't give us a discount if you charge the time at 2 a.m. Versus the time at 2 p.m. So I think those kind of things can be captured in guidance. Right now, that's the guidance that we have. We're going to start auditing that guidance as our next step. So not just relying on a sort of a warranty as to compliance with applicable law, so sort of thing, but now actually to drive into the process and have us specifically understand what law firms are doing in this regard, and speak to junior members of the team to make sure that those kind of behaviors are not just words on the page, but are actually tracked through in their lives to make sure that their meaning is driven and that they understand the goals that we're trying to achieve, and that their boss does actually care about them rather than just says that, or he or she cares about them right. When someone like me comes knocking. I think that's, so there you go, very actionable insight right away. As Andrew has mentioned, they have a company, a sort of a guideline for external counsel, which is, we want your best time. We don't want to pay for any time that's after 6 p.m. because it's not the ideal time for us. I think the sort of a deeper take back from this is, try talking to your private practice or your external counsel, have a conversation with them about, they might be able to do much more than what you think they're able to do. Sadek, this is almost calling out Andrew's reply. So many clients, now actively engage in respect of service providers' compliance with DE&I policies, for example. How are you addressing them in terms of development at Hadaf and Partners, and your firm's relationship with the client?
Yes, I think your question is about the diversity, equality, and inclusion policies, and you're saying that clients are increasingly asking law firms to confirm that they have those policies in place and perhaps ask for copies of those policies. Yeah, I mean, of course, many of the in-house counsel on the call have been in private practice previously, and they know that this has been a trend in from the days of the millennial bug, what was it, the 2000 bug, and making sure you had all the policies in place. So sometimes clients can drive the behavior of their suppliers or their service providers by asking them to ensure they have policies in place. And I think, in the UAE, certainly that is a growing trend. But I think, as I said earlier, we at Hadaf & Partners are striving through looking at our own development goals and trying to ensure that we are providing the best environment in terms of wellness, in terms of diversity, inclusion. And it's not so much about only what clients may be asking us, but it's about us doing what we think is right. Because I think, I'm going back to Andy's points, and I thought they were great, in terms of to achieve engagement and good business outcomes for your own people and your clients, and unlocking that value that law firms have and in-house departments have, we need to be focused on these agenda items anyway. So we should be doing it not because it's a process that's obliged on us. We should think it's the right thing to do. So that's why I think at our firm, we are investing in this. As I said, we have a new post purely at a very high level, looking at development and training. Again, Andy's third point earlier on was, teaching people. He said law firms aren't very good at teaching lawyers management skills, about workflows and to ensure engagement. These aren't skills that law firms maybe typically teach. So I think that we are focused on that. And part of that, of course, is diversity, inclusion, equality or equity, within the organization. So, I believe in the US and in Europe and some of the jurisdictions that are maybe a little bit ahead of the UAE, they're not only asking for the policies, but they're auditing performance of law firms. So we need to be ready for that, not by writing policies. It's about what you truly believe in. And for me, I believe in it because I want to retain and attract the very best people. I want to be an excellent law firm by international standards and part of that firm and to lead that firm. So to do that, we must invest in all of this. So yeah, it's not a reaction to requests of clients only, but of course that is a business imperative. So I think it's something that is very important for everyone in the organization.
Great, thank you so much. I'd like to go to Deepa. Deepa, I mentioned earlier, UAE is a very diverse environment in terms of nationalities, backgrounds, religion, cultures. And you are a great example of this. For the benefit of in-house counsel listening in today, what are your thoughts about DE&I in UAE? Could you contextualize it for us a bit?
So the thing is, all of us aspire to succeed in whatever we do. But at the same time, we have to recognize that in every one of us, there is an implicit bias within us. And therefore, with diversity in the UAE comes people with subtle forms of exclusion, whether it is biasness, racial profiling, stereotyping, making negative judgments without really thinking through the thought process. And in fact, it was in the UAE that when I was with Dell Technologies, and I continue to be with Dell Technologies, and I sit on the global board, again, Yosr, we've got an employee resource group that's also called Mosaic, and we focus on the term cultural intelligence. And what I want to leave, in the interest of time, what I want to be able to tell our audience today is that I think as lawyers and as individuals, wherever we are, and going back to what Yosr was talking about as well, some of those barriers have come down in terms of being vocal on how we can remove prejudices, how we can, combat unconscious biasness. And so, Mosaic as an ERG in Dell Technologies, in 2014, we had 2 members. Today, in 2021, we've got over 7,000 members. That is because people are recognizing the importance of keeping your unconscious biasness checked in. And we do that through what is called Cultural Intelligence Awareness Workshop. It's a 3-hour workshop, which is being cascaded through the leaders. And I really like the way Mohammed talked about, some of the, again, behaviors that he expects to be modeled across the firm, because that tone has to be set at the top. So if leaders can set that tone, so again, with the Cultural Intelligence and short CIAW, which we're rolling out through Leadership Cascade. We've also got programs within our ethics training that focuses on discrimination. And at the same time, we've got a global mentoring program through Mosaic, which is a 6-month program to mentor, in a circle of 3 individuals on cultural intelligence. What is the difference? In some cultures, we give direct feedback. In some cultures, you give indirect feedback. In some cultures, you are more risk averse. In some cultures, you want certainty. In some cultures, you're more independent. In some other cultures, you're more collaborative and interdependent. How do you bring balance in a team so that there is equilibrium within the team? And all that can only be done through education. And so that's what we are focused on. And I hope that's helpful, actionable insights.
Great, wonderful. It's good to know that there are these kind of initiatives internally, and I think for anyone, if maybe it's not a company not as big as Dell, maybe it's a smaller company or a mid-sized company. These are great initiatives to have internally, educating, in terms of furthering the education around DE&I topics. Mohammed, I'd like to go to you. What are your thoughts about equality and inclusion in the workplace? And have you worked with clients who've kind of required you or demanded a DEI or a similar policy in place? You're on mute.
No, we haven't. No, not we haven't. But with this, something that we have implemented. I think half of our workforce is women. I think, different levels in the work environment. We are, UAE is, we have like 16 nationalities in the UAE. We are all the same, whether you are the one who prepared the tea or you are the one, the head of the firm. We are all equal. We celebrate everyone's birthday. We celebrate everyone's occasions. We are all equal. We are all the same. As simple as that, So this is the way we act and the way we work.
Thank you very much. And inclusivity, that's I guess the key word over there, and also engagement with everyone. Faizal, very quickly, you mentioned, and Andrew mentioned about their internal policy when it comes to dealing or working with external counsel in terms of mental well-being. Does AbbVie have such policies? I think you mentioned something that prioritizes law firms or benchmarks law firms. Could you very quickly tell us a little bit about that?
Yep, sure, Rahul. We have designed and implemented a program in somewhere in 2017 and 2018, which requires our external counsel to take certain measures to ensure that they align with our values and principles on, we call it double EDI. We have an extra E and which stands for equity. And by equity, we mean fairness and equality to achieve better outcomes. So we rate our external law firms based on certain criteria. We knew that it was a tough program to implement, and we had to inform them and explain them what our objectives on this program. We engaged with law firms upfront, and we set them certain measurable KPIs, which included gender diversity and ethnic diversity, to mention a few. We also gave them sufficient time to implement these, which was a 5-year program. And we have a mechanism where we measure these outcomes on a year-to-year basis. So we have seen some law firms making tremendous progress in this sense, and we are happy that we could bring in some change, at least in some organizations. We have also seen a few disappointing experiences in certain countries. So I know that the components and requirements of EDI could be different in different jurisdictions, and what is suitable for the US or EU, for example, may not be a good fit for the MEA. But in the MEA region as well, I'm trying to prioritize law firms which aligns with our principles to a certain extent. It's as Sadiq said, it's a growth in progress. We might take some more time to achieve all these things, but definitely we prioritize law firms based on certain criteria.
Wonderful. That's great to hear. It seems like this is where either large corporations are going with bigger in-house legal departments are going towards. They're asking more from their external counsel. I think that's the key. Yosr, you've spoken at many of these similar topics and similar events, and you've had your own journey. And thank you very much for answering the questions that are coming in from the audience by typing them. Could you very quickly tell us a little bit about what can in-house counsel like yourselves do to further their journey to becoming leaders within their organization when it comes to inclusion, and not just it's okay to be engaged in these initiatives, but what can they do to actually be leaders in these initiatives? Could you tell us a little bit?
Sure. I mean, so here's the thing: D&I has never been a priority, within the workplace as much as today. So it's not just restricted to UAE. It's about how we work. If you don't have a diverse team, that will eventually hurt your business performance, because you can't have, a lot of people on the same table thinking in the same way and they're all the same age. It won't work, right? So you don't have to battle to change the world. It's really what we can do on our day-to-day basis to make a kind of difference, right? One of the things I mentioned it before is the blanket menu of initiatives in terms of diversity wouldn't tackle the issue, right? It wouldn't solve your problem within the, within your organization, within your team. So it's important that you listen to such webinars, listen to what other companies are doing, see what may suit you, but also start talking to your employees. And I give an example here to what Gartner, I think, is amazingly doing, is that when they're even adopting a hybrid model, they're not just saying, all employees have to go on a hybrid model. It's not really doing that. Effectively, they're engaging us as employees on a business unit level and a management level to ask us, what do you think will work best for your teams? Have you talked to your teams? What you're thinking, what you're seeing on the ground? So it's not like, the management is giving us, what's working. Eventually, they want the people not just to hire diverse talent, but how can we retain the diverse talent that we brought on the table? As managers, as legal people, I think maybe I'll give very small tips to how can we as individuals support our team, right? So one thing to demonstrate our inclusive behavior is that allow your team to make decisions on how they will work from home or, control their time. Give them the share of the decision of how the idea, let them come with the idea of how they conduct their virtual check-ins. Don't impose your meetings on them, rather ask them, how frequent do you think we should be meeting? How do you want to socialize or not? Some people wouldn't even want to be on cameras in the first place. They feel that, that's too much for them. So ask them, let them come with what works best for them in terms of work, right? Fostering the team accountability is a second step. Brainstorm with them. How would you assess their work performance in this kind of virtual environment? You might have the working parent, you might be having someone who's too old, he's not having that same level of commitment. Let them come with the feedback of how they want to be assessed as employees. For me personally, for example, I'm someone who is heavily engaged in the community. I want to give back. Some other people on the team wouldn't, right? So my kind of measurement and performance shouldn't be the same as someone else. Networking, I think, in a way that encouraging your team members to leverage, as Deepa said, the ERGs, right? And the groups that connect them together with not just the internal team, but also the outside business units. It's amazing that how as legal team, we always think or at least you always hear a lot of people or a lot of companies or a lot of BUs are achieving so much in that area, but us in the legal community, unfortunately, we're still talking about it, right? Why? Because we're talking about it much, but we're not achieving so much. So it's amazing what we can learn from other BUs if you only engage in talking with other people outside your legal community.
Right.
The more you learn, the more you can bring those kind of practices within your team, right?
Yeah, I think that's a very,
Communicating
very
about the
good point.
transparency is one aspect I'd also, talk is like, I tell my team, like, they can be authentic if I am not also being authentic. So being transparent within my team, if I'm not doing okay, I'm taking a break for my mental health, for example, it's okay. I mean, if I'm not leading by example, my team wouldn't feel safe to share their issues, to share that they're not okay, they're
Right.
having issues within their team, and they would feel judged. So I am aware that I might have an implicit bias. Therefore, I am being very explicit about it. Like, guys, this is something I feel that I might be doing, and therefore I'm being transparent, and therefore I expect them to do the same.
I think one thing you mentioned is just quickly would like to touch on that is talking to others, getting outside of either your legal department or even within your organization, know what the other corporations or other organizations are doing, learn from them. And I think Faizal has, we spoke about this. There are some mentorship programs. And Andrew,
Exactly.
you mentioned also at Fnatic, you have a couple of initiatives, internships, which prioritize applicants from underrepresented backgrounds. So that's very important. I think,
I mean, and I'll move it forward, but I think one thing, when we initiated the Gartner Crew program, it was ideally initiated as a woman at Gartner, but we allowed our male allies, we allowed every person from every, business unit, whether too senior, too junior, to be able to join. And it was created as a group mentoring. So it's a group of 5 to 6 sitting together, meeting on a weekly basis. It was a huge success because not because of anything, rather than people were learning from other BUs. I personally wouldn't, I wouldn't say thrive, but get a lot of ideas if I was only talking to my legal peers, right? I got a lot of ideas that I was able to implement only because I was talking to people outside my BU.
Absolutely.
So that is just an example, and it may sound simple, but it's so important.
It's very important, and we learn that not just within the context of what we're talking about, but even as different departments where they're hiring, it's sometimes best to go outside this the experience bracket and hire somebody from outside so they can bring in fresh ideas, and you learn so much just by talking to other people. Now, I know we have just 1 minute left, and we were talking about how there are different initiatives from different companies and how you should learn what's happening in different countries. Andrew, can you just very quickly tell us about the initiatives at Fnatic?
Yeah, so I mean, touching on points we've heard about cognitive diversity, talking about things that we've heard about listening to people, I think Yosr made some fantastic points there around the importance of reaching out to others in your organization. One way that we've tried to hyper-accelerate that, just because esports, and this is true of media and entertainment more generally, is extremely non-diverse, particularly at the upper ends of the chain. And what we can do to do something about that is to try and either represent women, people who are not white in the content that we create, and also to try and push that through as a team to support people from marginalized communities that are around offices that Fnatic runs, and bring them into our processes. So one of the things that I think is very challenging for people who are not from traditional backgrounds, let's say, to come into tech and new business in that way. Sometimes people just don't have a foothold, so giving them a foothold has been important, and that's been really valuable for everybody that's been involved in the process. So to the extent that anybody on this chain can support that, or participants themselves and their businesses can support that, I'd really encourage you to do so, because it's been very rewarding, not just those individuals, of course, but also for everyone in Fnatic that's been involved in that process.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And that's the end of our panel discussion today. I know we had a couple of more things to kind of dive deep into, but like I said when we started the discussion, this could, every answer from our panelists today can be a separate series of discussions. And it's something that we would like to actually, as in-house community, would like to facilitate. So thank you very much. Thank you, Andrew, Sadiq, Faizal, Mohammed, Deepa, and Yosr. Thank you very much for your insights and taking out the time. And hopefully we can meet together in person for the next in-house community Congress. Now, I'd ask everyone to, if you can switch off your webcam. Thank you very much. Right, so that concludes our day 2 of the in-house community e-Congress for UAE. Just a reminder to everyone present today, the 3rd day and the last day of the UAE In-House Community e-Congress would be on the 4th of October, that's Monday, and we'll start around 3 p.m. on the day and finish at around 10:04 p.m. That's UAE time. We'll have a session around commercializing your intellectual property rights. And this session would be presented by James Dunn and Victoria Woods from Hardif and Partners. So please join us for that discussion and that presentation. Now, we will close this webinar now, and right after we do this, you'll see a survey pop up on your screen. Please do take out the time. It's only 2 minutes, or perhaps less than 2 minutes, to fill the survey and send it to us so that we can keep creating these important discussions and presentations for you. With that, thank you very much and have a great day. Bye-bye.